the Tube Condenser Microphone. It's always been a mic that I've appreciated. The warmth and smoothness that a tube mic adds to a recording is just really pleasing, especially on vocals. But I don't know, I guess I've just always looked at tube mics as out of my price range. I mean, I think of the U47, the 251, the C800G, and I guess that's why I've never really added one to my studio. But I've started to expand my mic locker and check out some of the more affordable tube mic options. The V13 from Vanguard Audio Labs is a mic that I thought would be great for us to go on a little tube microphone adventure with. Today, we're gonna listen to and learn about tube condenser mics, what makes them special, and you can decide if you need one for your studio. So the V13, as you just heard, was designed to deliver all the warmth and character that we love from vintage tube mics, but for a more affordable price, comparatively speaking. It's a mic that I've loved the sound of every time I've heard it used, and so far it has not disappointed. I did ask Vanguard Audio Labs to send me this mic and help me make this video, but they're not sponsoring the video or paying me in any way. Now, if you're recording with a condenser microphone, more specifically a large diaphragm condenser microphone, I think it's helpful to understand why you might want to use a tube condenser as opposed to a FET condenser. Tube microphones capture an audio signal through the mic's capsule. That signal is then amplified through the mic's vacuum tube impedance circuit before it's outputted. The vacuum tube, especially if it's nice and warmed up, is going to add some harmonic saturation, and the audio will have a warmth and a smoothness to it. Tubes can also help soften transients and naturally compress the signal during the amplification process, hence that smoothness. Tube microphones also require a dedicated power supply in order to run. Tube microphones sound great on pretty much any acoustic instrument. I really love them for recording acoustic guitars, and of course, they sound great on vocals.
Get behind the wheel, 2 tons of steel. Put the key in the ignition, like the way it feels. Drift into drive, right into the night. Rolling to the future and nothing's gonna stand in my way. Turning up the volume, drown out the darkness in me. I do what I need. Accelerate beyond the nightmares and the scars. Drive to the edge of the map where all the dragons are. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache, flying up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling around by all my mistakes. Driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache, under the influence of heartbreak, accelerate to make my escape.
FET condensers work kind of similarly to tube condensers. The main difference is instead of passing through a tube circuit, the audio is passing through a solid-state transistor circuit. The recorded audio is going to be a little cleaner, definitely less colored, more detailed. You also typically get a little more top-end presence with a FET condenser, but that top end is a little more harsh and definitely less smooth than what you get with a tube condenser. Let's take a listen to the difference between a FET condenser and a tube condenser on Javi's vocals. We'll be using the Vanguard Audio Labs V4 for our FET condenser, and of course for our tube condenser, we'll be using the V13. Let's take a listen.
Get behind the wheel, 2 tons of steel. Put the key in the ignition, like the way it feels. Drift into drive, right into the night. Rolling to the future and nothing's gonna stand in my way. Turning up the volume, drown out the darkness in me. I do what I need. Get behind the wheel, 2 tons of steel. Put the key in the ignition, like the way it feels. Drift into drive, right into the night. Rolling to the future and nothing's gonna stand in my way. Turning up the volume, drown out the darkness in me. I do what I need. Accelerate beyond the 90s and the stars. Drive to the edge of the map where all the dragons are. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Accelerate beyond the nightmares and the scars. Drive to the edge of the map where all the dragons are. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Flying up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Driving, driving,
Now, you
driving,
may have noticed this little multi-pattern dial on the power supply that lets you switch between different polar patterns. What's cool about the V13 is you have all of these in-between settings, which let you blend multiple polar patterns together. And this has a number of really useful applications. Things like frequency response and proximity effect are going to change between polar patterns. Having these in-between settings just lets you dial in your sound a little more precisely, and it gives you a lot more flexibility when you're recording different sound sources. This also lets you tailor the balance between direct and ambient sound that's being picked up by the mic. And when you're recording multiple sound sources at the same time, having all of these different polar patterns will let you blend between those 2 sources. Just to give you an idea of what these different polar patterns sound like, let's take one more listen to Javi's vocals.
Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes. Now I'm driving, 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 driving. Under the influence of heartache. Flying up in 6 with no feet on the brakes. Rolling right by all my mistakes.
So let me know in the comments below if you are team Tube Condenser or team FET Condenser. I'll tell you this, the V13 has really lived up to the hype for me and has definitely put me on team Tube Condenser, at least for the time being. Check out this playlist right here for some more microphone videos. Thanks so much for hanging today, my friends. I'm Patrick. I will catch you in the next video. Peace.